Hello, and welcome to our Degrees of Debt Rally. Thanks to the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point for hosting this event. I'm Noelle Dickman, a journalist for USA Today Network Wisconsin covering education, and coincidentally, I'm still paying for my own education. This event is being carried live at the across the USA Today Network Wisconsin, and will be available for replays. We want to acknowledge the Wisconsin National Guard, which is underwriting our Degrees of Debt series. A representative from the Guard is available to answer questions about their tuition assistance programs. Degrees of Debt is designed to do three things. The first is to let our readers know about the seriousness of student debt. Later this year, we're going to explore how candidates for office say that they're going to address student debt and college affordability. And next year, we'll be writing about ways students and families can make smart decisions about higher education. There's more than $1.3 trillion of student debt in our country. The federal government owns or backs more than 90% of the debt, and many recent graduates have fallen behind on their payments. This next slide shows where Wisconsin ranks in percentage of students graduating with debt. On average, it's about $29,000. Now, I've been sharing my own number on videos in this series, which you may have seen with my cats. But my number is $45,000 after I graduated from UW-Oshkosh, and I also had another semester at a private college. But I didn't share my experience as a debt overachiever to impress anybody. I did it to foster a conversation around the second aim of the series, to provide information to students and to families. There are many factors behind the increase in student debt, and one of them is the amount of state financial support per student spending is declining. This is happening in Wisconsin and across the country. As you can see from these two slides, state support hasn't kept up with tuition increases. From 2009 to 2015, tuition increased 17%, but state funding per student fell by 15%. UW system graduates are also finding it harder to keep up with their loan payments. About 1 in 20 default, which means they miss payments for at least 9 months. And default rates are even higher for Wisconsin Technical College graduates. High levels of student debt are making it harder for young people to buy homes, to go on vacations, or to leave their parents' basement. Here at UW-Stevens Point, you win some and you lose some. On average, you have a greater unmet financial need than students at other UW schools, but you graduate with slightly less debt. So, in addition to our 4 campus rallies this fall, early next year we're going to be holding a series of college info nights to help middle school and high school students and families make smart decisions about higher education. And we'll be having one here in Stevens Point, so stay tuned for details. The final goal of Degrees of Debt is why we're here tonight. We've been asked why we're describing these events as rallies instead of a meeting, a forum, or a town hall. And not to get too grammatical on you, but we're using the word rally as a verb and not a noun. We want to bring energy and a sense of urgency to the discussion. So what's our common purpose and cause to rally around? We're here to talk solutions to make college more affordable and to make college more accessible. So to that end, we've invited some really smart people on stage here to share their knowledge, experiences, and their ideas. And we're gonna start with some questions with our panel, and then we're gonna take questions from the audience. So let's introduce them. We're joined by Samantha Agerter, a UW-Stevens Point senior who is majoring in healthcare administration. Carly Caputa, a 2015 UW-Stevens Point graduate who is working at the Performing Arts Foundation in Wausau. Andrew Glazner, the Vice President of the Student Government Association at UW-Stevens Point. Mandy Slowinski, the Director of Financial Aid of the Financial Aid Office here at UW-Stevens Point. And Mark Young, an admissions counselor at UW-Stevens Point and a 2013 Point grad. So Mark, let's start with you. You've been out in the real world for nearly 3 years now and have the unique perspective of being an admissions counselor. What do you know now that you wish you would have known when you were a student?
That's a great question. looking back at it, I wish I would have known it's never too early to save for college. I didn't have it in my head because I was a first-generation college student. So I didn't plan ahead and to help cut some of these costs. I came into college with little to no knowledge, little to no assistance because my parents had never experienced the collegiate track. I also wish I would have known that I didn't have to do it by myself, that there was a lot of help available. Did I have help throughout this process? Indeed. But I wish I would have sought out even more help because there are a ton of resources out there that students just don't know about.
Gotcha. Thank you. Carly, you graduated in 2015 with over $35,000 in debt, and you work in a nonprofit world, or in the nonprofit world, excuse me. How much of an issue is student loan debt for you and for your fellow young professionals?
Well, it was a huge issue at first. Actually, when I first started paying, I had this idea that I was going to do double payments to help knock down those 10 years of paying off my loans, and then I realized for that I'd have to be paying close to $500. So that quickly went off the window, and I started by paying the minimums, and luckily now that I have more money in my bank account, I can pay off a little more, still nowhere near close to doing my original plan of doubling my loan payments for the minimums, but I'm slowly there. However, I know some of my closest friends from college are not doing as well. I have a friend who can't even start paying off his loans because he didn't have enough financial aid to pay off his last semester, so he is still paying off that. So I know for me and for many others that it's hard. You sometimes just don't have the money.
Thanks, Carly. Now to Mandy. Many of the numbers that we've been sharing are state and national averages for all colleges and universities. What is distinct about UW-Stevens Point and the issues that face its student body here?
Thank you, and thanks for having me tonight. Well, from a financial aid perspective, and that's what I can give you, I know that we enroll a greater amount of low-income students at UW-Stevens Point than other UW campuses do. So the lower the income, the greater financial need, as your slide showed. Also, 48% of our students are first-generation college students. So we're having to assist, educate students and their families navigate the university for the first time. 80% of our students do receive some form of financial aid, and that's a lot. Also, as your slide did show, our student loan debt is at $30,159, which is below the national average, and our most recent cohort default rate is at 3.7%, which is below the national and state average. And so, UW, if you compare us to other schools in the Midwest, we really are a good bargain, a great bargain, and we're affordable, and I just really do think education is still a great investment.
Thank you. So we're also very pleased to be joined by two UW-Stevens Point students, and one perspective that's often missing from these conversations is students. So Andrew, as a student government leader, how do you see the university system meeting the challenge of helping students who need assistance paying for college?
Thank you for that question. First off, I'd like to speak on the fact that I cannot speak explicitly to the university system as a whole. They do not share counsel with me, but I can say that they would like no more cuts on the state level, and that they would love to have more funding from the state to offset the budget freeze. What I can talk about mainly is on SGA. We do have plans to lobby the new Senate session and to make college, to propose ideas to make college more affordable. Some of those would include refinancing student loan debt, as well as some other measures.
Thank you. Now for you, Samantha. Can you describe your experience paying for college, and what advice would you have for other students that might find themselves in a similar situation to yourself?
Okay, so to start by explaining my situation, I am a first-generation college student. So going into college, I, along with my parents, really had no knowledge of the college experience. So we really didn't know what we were getting into. And my parents didn't really have the extra income to help me pay for college, so I was kind of jumping into things on my own, not really knowing what to do because we didn't really have that education in my high school. And so I actually started my college journey at another university, and when I got there, I realized it wasn't the right fit for me. If I was going to be paying for it on my own, I couldn't really afford it. So I actually took some time off, and I worked, and I saved money, and all the while I was taking part-time classes at a local tech school. And then I found my way here to UW Stevens Point, and I'm a senior. I'll be graduating in December. The whole time I've been here, I've still been paying for college and expenses by myself, and it's been hard at times, but I've had to rely pretty heavily on financial aid, and I've worked the whole time I've been in college. At times I've worked 2 jobs, and so from those experiences, I think the advice that I would give to students in similar situations to mine would be start early and ask questions. Start early by searching for those scholarships, applying for the scholarships, because they are there and a lot of people don't apply to them, so there's a lot of opportunity available to students. And I think if you have those questions, there's so many great resources on campus that are available to students that are happy to answer the questions and be there for support. And so that brings me to my other piece of advice is use those campus resources. They're here for a reason, and this campus is full of great offices such as financial aid, enrollment services, SIEO, admissions. And then my last piece of advice would be a responsible and smart borrower. I think students should know the responsibility it takes to take on student loan debt, and I think they should understand repayment options, interest rates, and when they would need to begin repayment. And I think the financial aid office on this campus is a great resource to help students with that.
Gotcha. Thank you. So now we're going to take questions from the audience. If you have a question or a comment, please write it on a note card and hand it to Jim or Kelly, who are standing in the aisles. And they will let you know when it's your turn to ask a question. So there's a couple of ground rules here. Please be civil, please be succinct, and please be solutions oriented. It's fine if you have a question for the panel or if you want to make an observation or a statement, but be kind. No one in this room is responsible for student debt, but with a common purpose and working together, we can make constructive change. So my colleague Rory Linnane is at the mic.
Thanks, Noelle. Before we get to the questions, we have a video we'd like to play with some interviews with students here at UW Stevens Point.
So what kind of tips do you have for students about paying for college?
The best thing I can do is basically what I do over summer is obviously just work over the summer for a full-time job, and then I tend to not spend as much during the week, going out to eat with friends and stuff like that. Basically just spending less over the week with them.
I say start saving early. What I did is I put 90% of my income away, and I saved that for college, and then take out as few loans as possible.
The way I'm paying for college right now is scholarships. So when kids are seniors or juniors, definitely apply for every scholarship that you can. Make sure to get involved in high school so you can look good for scholarship applications. And if you are struggling financially, financial aid is also really nice.
I'd really just say budget, because when you're here, you don't have a lot of money sometimes, and it's just knowing what you can afford and what you can't, and just knowing is there something you want, but I don't need that right now, and just making sure that you have enough money to last you through however long you need that money to last for.
For me, I would just have to say join the military. They're pretty much paying the whole ride all 4 years, so keeps me out of debt.
Yeah, definitely. Pay UW Stevens Point students.
And here we are. And look at that, I'm even wearing the same outfit. How funny. All right, Rory's back at the mic.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to start off with one of my own questions. A couple of you mentioned being first-generation students, and Mandy, you talked about how there's a higher percentage of first-generation students here at UW Stevens Point. Can you all discuss some of the unique barriers you think that first-generation students are facing when they're trying to figure out how to plan for college, how to finance college, and navigate all of that?
Sure, I'll go first. Oh, sorry. Well, I think that, Samantha and, others had already hit on that. I think it's that education or knowing what resources are available. And sometimes I think that's a barrier. And I say that because, and I can speak for myself too, as being a first generation college student. And when I was in high school, I just didn't know. I had to work even in high school. And so even if there were high school nights, I didn't have a lot of support from my parents. So I think just trying to get the word out to students, and we try to do so. We implemented a new financial literacy online tool called Grad Ready a couple years ago, and it's not only available for UWSP students and staff, but others outside of the campus who maybe aren't even affiliated with us. So that's a good resource where it talks about, takes you through like little modules about budgeting and how to pay for college, but also later financial aid and when you go into repayment and looking at different repayment options. And so, we're trying to get the word out about Grad Ready, certainly, and to help maybe break down some of those barriers about first generation, college kids, about maybe not knowing what resources are available.
Thanks. Do any of the others want to address that? Yeah.
I guess in my situation, so when I was in high school, my parents just wanted me to be as involved in high school as possible. So I did 2 sports, I did drama club, so I had absolutely no time for a job. So when I came to college, I had like $0 in my bank account, $50 from my grandpa because my birthday was right before the first day of school. So I completely relied on financial aid, thus my obscene amount that I owe right now. And I guess with my sisters who followed, my parents definitely put more pressure on them to get a job, to help them pay for at least part of it. And even my parents started this plan with my sisters that it's kind of every other semester in college they'll pay, and then my parents will pay, which I was a guinea pig kid. They're like, oh, these loans, they're great, they'll help you. And then I don't think they realize that they're great at the time, but they're all on me now.
I think another way to combat the hurdles that students face is just breaking down the language and the things that are out there online. A lot of times when you have a first-generation college student, they look at a federal website like FAFSA, or they go into a financial aid office and they get all this literature, they get this message, and then the person on the other end says, do you understand? And the student says, uh-huh. And they walk out just as more confused as when they walked in. So having someone there to decipher that language and help the student understand what it really means to take out a student loan, how that will impact them later on down the line. I know a lot of students that I've helped navigate through a FAFSA website will just click down the road, and I say, wait, you need to understand what you're doing here. And so helping them understand what is really being said through those federal documents would really help combat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I think a lot of students do sign up for loans without really fully understanding what that's going to mean for them down the road, or how much they'll have to pay each month and for how long. So for those of you who have graduated, how have you been impacted by the debt that you carry? Has it affected like decisions you make in your life about, where you're going to move or what kind of job you're going to try to find? Or have you, seen that impact any of your friends?
Well, I can answer that question. My debt accumulation was close to $50,000. With being from Detroit, Michigan, I was paying MSEP, which is the Midwest Student Exchange program. And with that, it was actually cheaper for me to attend UW-Stevens Point opposed to pay in-state tuition in the state of Michigan. With that, I took out a decent amount of loans, and now I'm paying that back. Luckily, I'm working in higher education where if I continue on-time payments for 10 years, a lot of my federal loans will be forgiven. But some of my friends that are from Michigan that are not in higher ed are paying, really big amounts, or even they have to, defer them, which is not good in my opinion. But the federal government, I would say, are making it more feasible. They're doing different options and different repayment plans that students can get on based on their income, but that still may continue to rise over time, whereas their income might not rise as fast as the repayment plan.
Okay. Andrew, you mentioned earlier that you're planning to do some lobbying of the state legislature on these issues. Can you get into more, like, what things are that you'll be looking for or asking for?
So the UW system put out what they would like the budget, what they would like the state legislature to consider. That was $42.5 million for the entire UW system. It's not the $100 million that we've in the past requested. It's very bare bones. It's just costs to continue and other things like that. But what specifically we'd be addressing with the state legislatures is to reestablish public confidence in the UW system, in that in order to have and tying it to job and economic growth, and that an educated workforce is actually better for the state in the long term than having an uneducated workforce and having an uneducated population. So trying to tie it towards more of the Republican values that we're starting to see that are coming out in the legislature. More conservative values as well as trying to reduce some of the administrative costs that we are having at this time. So there are other ways of doing this. For instance, fund the freeze, advocating for a reallocating your loans, and trying to consolidate and trying to minimize how much you're actually paying and refinance your loans. So those are some simple courses that some colleagues and myself believe can be beneficial towards students in the long run. Also, I think we do need to, and I'm behind Mandy's program in financial literacy. I think we need to have more programs and have a bigger outreach.
Okay, thanks. And there are elections coming up for some of the positions in the state legislature, and we've also heard presidential candidates talking about college affordability. If you all had a direct line to these people who are running for office, what would you want them to know about college affordability in your own journeys?
Well, I guess if I had a straight line, I'm not sure it's about college affordability is and my experiences, but I would like to see no further cuts to UW system, only because it has like a trickle-down effect where ultimately it impacts the students on each campuses, where it could impact maybe students not being able to get certain sections of courses, or all of these things that courses being cut, only being offered at certain time, even system maybe losing some of these high quality professors. And I know we've actually lost a couple over the years, but just that Wisconsin is, many students that come to visit me and talk to me often say that even when they're job searching, that many employers outside the state look for Wisconsin graduates because of their great work ethic and just all the great education that they got from the state of Wisconsin. And so really having that strong workforce with those, students hopefully are getting those critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, really does make well-rounded citizens. And that's something that I think that Wisconsin would want to continue to do. And just, if college affordability is, and student loan debt is a crisis, then certainly maybe look at where our priorities lay, and maybe put some additional resources to force student success or access.
Okay, thank you.
I would say, if I had a direct line, that we need to continue to invest and then even reinvest additional funds into education. if they want to look at it from a state level or a national level, I think the only way that we can progress as a state or as a country is to continue to educate. And so when you educate, people have a better chance of having a better paying job, which is then they don't have to rely as much on state funding or state programs. And then that helps our country progress because there's more money in the economy. We're spending more money here in the country instead of outsourcing jobs because, you know, people can't do those jobs. So I think education is a key to help our country or our state continue to move forward and be one of those powers.
All right, thank you.
I think also in keeping it affordable really would allow students to focus more on their studies and on those unpaid internships and on those jobs on campus that don't pay as well as a job at McDonald's or a job at Target, so that they can get the most they possibly can out of their time at the universities.
Thanks. Particularly for Mandy and Mark, since you work with students, what do you think is the biggest mistake that students often make when they're planning for college?
Probably lack of planning. I think we mentioned it, already, is just that sometimes it seems as if, students might arrive on campus and then say, oh my gosh, I have a bill. How am I going to pay that? So I think, those conversations, having them at an earlier age, either in middle school, junior high, before they even get to high school, so you can plan and save and, decide what your goals are going to be, and really to prepare. And really, I always tell students just to go and apply for scholarships, scholarship searches, treat it like a part-time job. If you're a student and you don't have a job or you work minimally, take that 5 hours a month and go do scholarship searches, because you could get $1,000 in 5 hours, and that's pretty good wage if you ask me. So just planning, getting the word out, having the conversations sooner and more often, because then it might help with some of those barriers of maybe students not understanding what they're getting into, and just ask questions. I didn't ask questions when I was younger. I didn't know. I was a little bit naive, but now looking back, had I asked a lot of questions, I probably would have planned a lot better, worked a little bit less, and so ask questions, because that's what we're here for, and we want our students to succeed by getting that degree, but also financially when they leave.
Question for you about that scholarships.
Mhm.
I had talked to a student who said, I think it was a UW Oshkosh student, and she was applying for scholarships when I had talked with her, and she said that no one applies, that there's so many scholarships out there that nobody even applies for, that they only have one applicant for. Do you see that on the opposite side, from that financial aid office standpoint? Do you see students not filling out scholarships, or can you speak to that?
Sure. Well, we don't award like institutional scholarships from our office, but from what we hear from some of the national scholarship searches, like we recommend FastWeb, and there's also many others. We always just recommend never pay to apply for a scholarship, because you shouldn't. But that so many scholarships go unclaimed each year because students aren't applying, and so. Some of our work study students in our office, we always tell them, did you apply? Go look at this, go look at this, to go apply for scholarships and look. Some of the scholarship searches out there that are available now, it's almost like a social media page in where you create a profile about yourself, and the more detailed it is, it selects the scholarships in which it believes that the students would be eligible to apply for, and then gives them the deadline dates and criteria. But I don't know what our outside scholarship, private scholarships came in at last year, maybe a little over $1 million or something, but there's so many more scholarships out there.
Yeah. Do you know if it's decreased than prior years, or has it always kind of been the scholarships are there and no one just fills them out? And I don't know how long you've been in your role, but
Yeah, I'm not seeing a decreased amount. I think our scholarship has pretty, been the same from year to year. But many students that we do come across do have are only receiving scholarships and don't need any other financial aid. Now, that's not a lot, or the majority, don't get me wrong, but some students at our institution, I mean, they're not paying for their tuition fees, room or board, because it's covered by their scholarships.
So it's possible.
It's possible.
Gotcha. Thanks.
I wanted to ask, what kind of misconceptions do you think there are out there about students and finance in college? Because I know when Noelle published a column about her own experience accruing debt, and when we've published stories about others, we always have comments from people who are like, I don't understand why this is happening. 30 years ago, I went to college and paid my way through, and it was fine. So what kinds of things do you think people maybe don't necessarily understand about college today and the struggles that students are facing?
I think one of the misconceptions is all the different layers that students are faced with these days, all the different outside distractions that they're faced with, all the different barriers that they have to get through, whether that be what they're facing at home, what they're facing at school, social media. There are just a lot of things that students are dealing with today that people weren't dealing with 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, and not only that, but also, I mean, yes, the cost of education has gone up since 30 years ago. And so also the demographics, I suppose, of our borrowers kind of have changed over time, where back in the, 70s, a lot of the higher income families maybe weren't borrowing as much or having to borrow, whereas now we see those families also borrowing for student loans. So I don't know if more of the responsibility is being placed on the students, but also too, I guess just a misconception is that personal expenses, living allowances, food. The university or colleges are probably one of the only places that figure in living expenses as part of their cost of attendance. And so if you just look at tuition and fees at those net prices, at UW Stevens Point, it's probably a little under $4,000, around $3,800 this year per semester. But we figure in all those living expenses and personal expenses and food into that cost of attendance. And so students not working, has an impact on those other costs, but we're allowing students to borrow for those other expenses while they're in college. So that obviously adds to their debt, but also their costs that they would have had regardless if they came to school or not.
What do you all think is a reasonable amount for students to work while they're going through school? So we've kind of heard different arguments to this. Some people say it's better to not work so you can get through as quickly as possible and accrue less debt and tuition that way, and some who say work as much as you can so that each semester you're taking out less. What do you all think about that?
I think that's a question that the individual student should best be able to answer, and whether they can or can't work. They should have the choice and the flexibility in determining how much they have to work. If they can't work to pay off the semester, then that's what loans and other forms of financial aid are for, to kind of help subsidize that lack of work. But I know students who can't work because if they start working, it dips into their academic performance. I know students who have 18 credits and are working a full-time job, and they make it seem so easy. And it's up to the individual student, I believe, that to figure out what their medium is and what their how it best works for them.
I would have to agree with Andy. It should be at the discretion of the individual student. Myself personally, in my undergrad, I worked 3 jobs, about 25 hours a week total while playing football and taking a full course load. Was that the best thing for me academically? No, because my grades did suffer at some times until I figured it out, I didn't have to be in this alone and that I could ask for help. But it took one or two semesters for me to understand that there was help out there and to set my pride aside and ask for help.
I think for me, it actually more depends on how the students are working. I already mentioned before about how important it is to get those internships and university jobs, because me as a college student, I had 2 jobs at the university, and I also volunteered for a couple of organizations, which felt like a job while taking overload credits. And personally, I saw no dip in my grades because everything was just interconnected, and the internships and the jobs were actually helping me form professional skills and helping me form skills for my classes. So I find it important that if you are going to work, to choose a job that is going to better you in the future. Because I have friends who also worked all 4 years at somewhere out of the university, making more money than I did, but they cannot find a job because they have not had the experience of working in the field in which they graduated yet.
Good point. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I agree with the others on the panel that it does kind of depend on the person and the workload that they have. And me personally, I've worked all the years I've been here at school. At times I worked 2 jobs and took full course load and were trying to do other things outside of school. And I had to gauge what was most important, and I chose academics because that's what I needed to do to succeed. And so I ended up having to quit one of those jobs. But now, currently, I still have a job on campus. I work about 10 hours a week, and I also have an unpaid internship. So I kind of think that students have to find that work-school balance and see what works best for them and how they can continue to be successful and just find what works best for them.
You know, going back to that misconception topic, I think students working in itself is one of those misconceptions that we've kind of run into, at least in my own experience and in my sharing my story. One of the things is people would constantly, email me or ask me, did you even work during college? And students these days aren't even working. For those of you that are working, or maybe you, how much hours a week do you actually work in, and versus how much class time do you have? Is it balanced, or is there way more class time?
I think for me, it's pretty balanced. I work at my on-campus job about 10 hours a week. I am taking 13 credits right now for my last semester, and I work about 10 and a half hours at my unpaid internship. So I have a pretty busy week, but I think I've learned through time how to manage all of those things. And I think that working a job on campus and working during college and doing that unpaid internship has helped me gain experiences and the knowledge that I think is worth it in the end.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think people realize that, you can tell somebody, go to school for 18 credits, and then on top of that, throw a job on top of that. And I don't think people who might identify with that misconception that I just mentioned, I don't think they realize that that's a lot to ask of somebody. I mean, as somebody who's working 40 hours a week, okay, go throw on, 2 more things or 20 more hours worth of work, and I mean, are they going to be able to do it? So I think work in itself is maybe one of those misconceptions, at least from my own viewpoint and what I've been hearing from in feedback. So anyways, just thought I'd pick your brain on that.
Did any of you all consider a 2-year school as an option, or a cheaper school as an option to start off at? And Mandy, have you had experience with students kind of going that route?
Absolutely. Well, we have to talk to students and families, and they're tough conversations, because really, if you think about it, anything about money is really having a tough conversation, and especially if you don't have enough. So, if a student can't make it, we look at what their goals are. We want every student at UW-Stevens Point, of course, but we also want them to succeed. So, we look at, we'll budget sometimes we sit down with families and we budget and look at their costs, and we try and say, well, do you need this coffee every day? You know, just try and do other things. But certainly, if we do see many students that do come and then maybe leave and then come back and finish that degree. I think a lot of the, especially over the last few years anyway, the transfer of credits between, you know, especially the UW institutions have gotten a lot better as well. But certainly it is cheaper or less expensive to go to a 2-year institution than it is. And if that's the right choice and the right path for that student, then certainly we do everything we can to help them.
Thanks.
That's a conversation I engage in on a daily basis because I meet with students all throughout the week. And parents, you're seeing it more and more these days where students and parents have the idea of starting at a 2-year, completing their associates, and then coming to the 4-year to finish up that bachelor's degree. And I try to talk about the value of a 4-year degree, but I also have to remember that, you know, this is their experience and this is their financial plan. And I have to make sure what I'm telling them, you know, appeals to their idea of what success means and what their financial goals look like. So if they want to start at a 2-year school because it's just more feasible, that's what they can afford at this time, then I'm going to encourage that. But if we can find ways as far as scholarship and financial aid to help them pay for this 4-year experience, then I'm going to help them do that.
I'm actually a graduate of the University of Wisconsin, Marathon County. I did go there for 2 years, or a number of years, and I did get my associate's degree before I came here. Personally, I had to go there to figure out what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to essentially not waste money, but I didn't want to spend money figuring out what I wanted to do before I took a major commitment and a major investment in a 4-year institution, where the prices is a little bit higher than a 2-year. So I understand completely, and I for some students I recommend the 2-year approach. For other students I recommend a 4-year approach. It really depends on how they're coming to the situation, how they're coming to the approach.
Mm-hmm. What would be a situation where you'd recommend the 4-year?
So I'm also a first-generation student, and I also recommend I recommend that sometimes students a 2-year is a lot easier for a new student who doesn't have a family history of college. In that while there are services that are tailored directly to first-gen, non-trads, even veterans sometimes, it also enables you to kind of center yourself and figure out where you want to go. So I recommend for students who have absolutely no idea what they want to do or where they want to go, a 2-year degree or a 2-year institution is a lot cheaper, and it'll enable you to give a breadth of just about everything, and then it'll enable you to figure out what you want to do before you attend a 4-year. Mm-hmm. And get that 4-year degree, a well-rounded education.
Okay.
To touch on that, I do think students have the ability to come to a 4-year institution, even if they are undecided. I think, there are about a third of our incoming freshmen that have no idea what they want to do. And a lot of students fall under the pressure of, I have to decide as I come in as a new student what I want to major in, and that's not the case. We encourage students to come in undecided. We have a 3-semester plan where they can look at, you know, the different things. They can take assessments, emotional assessments, and the Myers-Briggs. And based on those results, we're going to recommend majors and/or careers that fit their interests. And so I think that, you know, with the 2-year being an option, a cheaper option, would it be nice to go there and figure out during that time? Sure, but you can also do that at the 4-year scale.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Mark, as you're working with students on, you know, as you see students trying to figure out what to major in, how much do you see them considering, like, how much money they might be making in the future down the road? Well, how does that factor into their decisions versus just, like, their interests and what they'd like to study? And that question goes for all of you. How do you kind of balance, if you do kind of do that balancing act of how much money you might be able to make versus what you really are passionate about?
Sometimes that's at the forefront. Sometimes it's motivated by parents. Sometimes it's motivated by students. I see a lot of students who probably shouldn't be a bio major that come in as a bio major because they want to be a doctor, because they see that price tag or that earning statement, not understanding what it takes to get to that point. in my own experience, I came in, I wanted to be an accounting major because my idea of those folks is that they wear fancy suits, drive nice cars, and make really good money. But once I realized how much math was involved, I said, no way am I an accounting major. And so another component is students see what's on TV, and they see the glitz and the glam. And so I have a lot of students come to me and say, I want to major in CIS. The TV show? And so it's it varies on the student, even the demographic location that I'm in recruiting at that time, because depending on the socioeconomic status, you might have an expectation that, you're going to be a doctor, or you're going to be a lawyer, or even in a area of poverty, you might see, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer because I want to escape this type of environment. So it just depends on the demographic that you're in.
I guess from a nonprofit but viewpoint, I had no idea I was going to wind up in nonprofit. I really enjoyed broadcasting and sports, which isn't too much higher paying. I never really thought about my salary much in college. However, it was a step down when I got my job as far as paycheck-wise. But once I learned the whole budgeting aspect of post-grad, it became so much easier. And I think, honestly, when you find something you're passionate about, you can make, I don't know, I'm not going to say how much I make an hour, but you can make, I almost did, but you can make, I'll just round down, you can make $10 an hour, and I round way down, don't worry, I've got a wonderful job, they pay me well. You can make that feel like 20.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I was just going to say that certainly I do see many students, and we advise many students as well, looking at different options, looking for that, either that high paid job or what they're really passionate about. And there's almost a split in between. But, money's always a driver, and money's a great thing, but, we want and love what we do, and we hope that you love what you do, because if you don't, it's going to be a pretty long life of kind of being depressed, or you make it work, but certainly those conversations are held, and I do think students are looking for those higher income job, but then sometimes come into the reality like Mark and change their minds.
Do any of you have experience with taking out private loans? And how has that been, if so? No one's had to do that. Mandy, have you seen that with students?
Yes, we have, although our private loan our private loans have gone substantially down since the direct lending several years ago, and so I think in 15-16 we probably only certified about $4 million in private education loans, and we do have an online tool called Fast Choice where we actually educate the student about student private loans before it gets to the list of private loans available for them, although they can apply through any lender of their choice, but we try to educate them about them as well before they do that. And 21% of our students do study abroad. And so 300 to 400 students each year are, getting those higher costs because of that study abroad, although, that study abroad also leads to, broad-based diverse education, which is fabulous. But, we see greater borrowing for programs, those study abroad programs with private loans.
I guess I could share my own. I did take out a private loan, and that was something that I never shared in our series before, but given that none of you took out a private loan, I could maybe just share my own experience. And with financial aid, there's a certain point where you hit your limit when you can't take any more out. And my senior year of college, I hit that limit, and my last semester, I was out of luck. And so what I had to do was I actually got 2 private loans. I got one from Wells Fargo and then another one from UW Credit Union. And it was a relatively easy process, but then the interest rates were higher, and I was concerned about that. So what I had to do as a result was make sure that those were the very first loans that I paid off, because otherwise the interest was just going to kill me. So that was my experience. It was easy, but it was also just one more loan, and it was separate than paying back a lot of times it can get lumped together. So you really had to keep track of, okay, where is the money and who do I owe what? So ended up paying off those right away just to get them out of the way.
Makes sense. All right, and what do you guys wish that you had maybe known before you went into college? If you could go back in time and give yourself some advice, what would it be?
I think for me, it would be asking those questions I had. I think I was kind of like, oh, everyone's in the same situation as me. No one knows what's going on. So I think for me, going and visiting those campus resources and understanding what was going on, I think that would be valuable to me, and I think maybe that would have had an impact on if I would have stayed at that other university or if I would have transferred. But I think that just knowing that people are there to help me and that they want to help me would have been beneficial to me at that time.
I wish I would have educated myself a lot more than I did. It took me to about my junior year to really understand federal assistance and FAFSA and financial aid. Early in my academic career, because I had a 0 EFC, which is estimated family contribution, the federal government said, oh, well, here's a couple extra bucks. You can take it or you can leave it. And as an 18-year-old kid with $0 in my pocket, I said, I could take this money and spend it on whatever I want and just pay you back when I get that $1 million job. Sure, I'll take that money out. Not understanding what that would turn into later down the line, or how that would continue to grow interest. Sometimes as soon as I took it out, or sometimes it didn't start to accumulate interest until I finished school. But just educating myself.
I guess for me, it actually goes along pretty well, and that is I did not know for the longest time that you didn't have to take out all the money that FAFSA was offering you. So for my first couple years when I got a lot of loans, I had all this leftover money that I just spent, because I'm like, ooh, look at this, I get leftover, I'm getting more this semester, like it's time for a shopping spree, it's time for a trip. I was horrible at budgeting my freshman and sophomore year, and it really came back around my senior year where the loans went down because I was already a senior at this point, and I just wish I would have learned budgeting more, and then obviously not taking as many loans as I did, because I could have survived without them.
I guess for myself, it would be more usage of the resources that were available to me. I was a very prideful first year and second year in school, and I thought that I could always do it on my own. And then come my third year, I'm like, nah, I'm really hurting here. So I started using the resources more, but drilling that into me when I first came in, I would have had a lot easier time in college. And then obviously more education in terms of financial literacy and financial prepping as well.
Okay, thanks.
I was just gonna kind of agree with all of you guys, but having clear goals, maybe knowing what you want to do and prepare. Also consider taking more than just the standard 12 credits to be full-time, and because 12 and 18 you hit that plateau, and so if you take more, then you might be able to get out quicker, but also that means you might not be able to work as much. So there's that balancing act. Certainly financial literacy for me, had I known, I should have pinched my roommate actually and told me I didn't even know there was financial aid. So I wouldn't have had to work so much had I known and asked more questions. And so now, a couple decades later, it's ironic where I sit now, and that's why I'm just so passionate about hopefully getting that word out and going into high schools and trying to talk to students at that younger age, and even, again, just having those conversations just even, briefly, but just having them and continuing to talk about it.
All right, thank you. Do you have any other questions or any questions that you have for each other? All right, then I think I'll turn it over for the closing.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So we want to finish this evening with some closing thoughts from our panel. Now remember that we're taking what we learn here and we'll be using it in our Degrees of Debt series. And the final installment will be in March that will include a series of recommendations on making college more affordable. So panelists, what are your takeaways from tonight's discussion? Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I guess I'll just recap in that know what your options, ask questions. There's financial literacy tools available. Apply for scholarships.
I think going off of that is just being responsible and taking control and making the right choices with your education and your finances, so you know you're going down the right path. And I think even though students may have to take on some debt to get through their education, I think the experiences they gain and that education that they have is so valuable that I think it will help them immensely in the end.
I think mine is just recognizing that everyone goes through differently. Some have 4 years, some have 5 years, some have worked before college and don't have to take out any loans, while some are completely reliant. There are people that even just coming out of college have their parents just take on their loans and pay it back. There are so many different components in this topic that it's not an easy topic to address, and I think just recognizing that is the first step.
I would say to students, invest in yourself. If you can spend your summers in high school working, saving that money, putting a large portion of it away to invest later on down the line in your education, in the long term, investing in your future, then that can really benefit opposed to taking out loans and not experiencing that financial freedom after you graduate from college.
I would just say have clear, concise goals coming into the university. By having that, you'll be able to better formulate where you're going and how much you'll need to get there. And then that lends itself to education and to also usage of your resources and the scholarships that might be available to you as well.
Thank you. And thanks to you panelists for being here tonight. So now we want to hear from you. We set up a video booth that's outside the room where you can record a video sharing your story or a statement about student debt. And you can also send submissions to Rory. Details about that are on the screen. Thank you and good night.